Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Unbroken Veterans. This is Sam and Nick, and of course, we're sitting down with Olivia Nunn. Olivia, tell us about yourself.
Thank you guys so much for having me on your show. I truly appreciate it. So, for those that don't know me, I'm Olivia Nunn. I'm a retired U.S. Army officer, and I had the privilege of being able to spend 20 years in uniform. And with that, I had the opportunity to go three wonderful tours to Iraq. I've served at the tactical level and as well as the strategic level. And my last job was with U.S. Army Soldier for Life. So I was in the business of doing transition operations for our service members. And with that, a lot of people actually know me as Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Nunn that served as Director of Operations. And so my face was all over social media, particularly LinkedIn. I built one of the first Army podcast series, also known as U.S. Army Soldier for Life podcast series. And so I had the amazing opportunity to meet with a lot of nonprofit and for-profit organizations that were out there in that space that were in the business of trying to do good for our service members. And I've been retired now for 4 years. I own my own business. I'm a mom. I'm a pageant queen. I'm into bodybuilding. I'm an adrenaline junkie. What else? Yeah, and I'm in the nonprofit space.
Those are all great things, and you've
Oh,
done a very good job of diversifying, all your things. So that's that's really good. I'm the same way. I have a kind of a desk job and a sales job on the civilian side, and then my army job's been blowing things up. So, you got to diversify your skill set. That's all good.
absolutely.
So taking it back, starting at the beginning. How did your military career kind of start out unfold? So kind of a description of what you're doing when you decide to join, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'm second generation to serve. My dad served in the army. He was enlisted. He was a combat engineer, and he has three daughters. I'm the oldest, and I'm daddy's little girl, and I like followed my dad everywhere. And ever since the age of 4, I knew I wanted to be in the army. I remember sitting down with my dad, helping him shine his brass and shine his shoes and help iron his uniform. And I don't know, I just always thought being part of the army was kind of cool. And I told my dad I wanted to be in the army like him, and he was very adamant that great, you could be in the army, but you're not going to enlist. You're going to be an officer. At the time when he told me that, I had no idea what he was talking about. Hey, Dad, whatever. He's like, you're going to go to college and you're going to be an officer. I was like, okay. I had no idea what that meant. I just knew that the end state was I was going to be in the army. And I'm first generation Korean American. And so for us being Asian, it's really important to get your education. And so that was the mindset of you've got to go to school, you got to get your education. And so for him, it was be an officer. And I think really for him, because he was a male that spent time in combat arms, being a combat engineer, I think he saw the way that women were being treated. He was like, I don't want that for my little girl.
Yeah.
So he figured if she could be an officer, then life would just be so much sweeter. I don't know if that was the case.
That's awesome. He's a combat engineer. So Nick and I are combat engineers. We deployed together as combat engineers, so that's cool. Um, yeah, I get that for sure. My daughter, we're very close. My daughter and I, I'm close with my son too, but she's older. She's able to ask questions. She learned about 9/11 the other week. Of course, I went to Afghanistan, so it's like interesting conversations. But I mean, that's definitely something I think about is if she wants to join, or even for that matter, if my son wants to join, and what my support would look and guidance, probably even more than I think I'd have complete support, but it'd be how would my guidance look? So that's an interesting aspect to it. Um, so you went to college then. I'm assuming you did what your father asked or no?
I did. So I went to
Okay.
college. I went to college in Virginia and I did Army ROTC. Um, I ended up going to college for 5 years because I decided my first year was way more important to go to parties instead of class. So, I kind of took a detour my first year, but I figured it out. And I ended up graduating and I commissioned. And so I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Chemical Corps. Not what I wanted to be. I
How,
had
how, how did you end up? I don't mean to interrupt, but how
Yeah.
did you end up with that MOS?
So for us, we had to rank stack all, the branches that we could
Hmm.
go in as a second lieutenant. And chemical was not on my list. But I know why the Army put me into chemical. I'm pretty certain because they looked at my transcript and they look at all the classes I was taking.
Hmm.
And I graduated with a business management degree, but originally I had planned to graduate as a chemistry major. And it was in my
Uh,
junior year that I realized I am not really good at math. Contrary to your belief about being Asian and being great at math, this Asian was not good at math.
What's
And
the American part that ruined you?
I,
If you were 100%, you'd have been good, but the
yeah,
Americans just screwed you
nope,
up.
not, being biracial, nope, the definitely the English side of me kicked in and says, "Girl, you're not good at math." I could hack the science. I really love the science part, but the math part, I kept failing over and over. And so my advisor was like, "Olivia, I know you have the passion for the science, but I think the math is just not mathing for you. You need to figure something else out." So I completely changed over to business, which was another reason why I had 5 years at school instead of
Hmm.
4.
Yeah.
And with that, I think when the Army looked at my transcript, they saw all that heavy science in that background. So there was like, this would be a great fit for the Army to push her into chemical. So I wanted everything else. I was like, oh, they'll make me an engineer. I could be an engineer like my dad, or I could go to AG, or I asked for MP. I mean, those are my top three picks. Nope, you're going to be chemical. But you know what? God had this great plan for me because chemical core ended up being a great pick for me.
I have to say, like it seems like kind of a like I went to CS Chamber. That's the extent of my experience with it, which obviously sucked.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's one of those things. I'm very much of the mindset like you fear what you don't understand, and even with that brief interaction with chemical warfare, I really don't understand it. So it's always been scary. But then I went to ALC, which and then I roomed with the guy who was in chemical ALC, whereas I was the engineer one. And like I was kind of like learning more about it, and I'm like, damn, that kind of seems like a cool MOS. Like,
Yeah, we did a lot of cool things. So I really didn't mind it. It allowed we were considered jack of all trades, right? It allowed us to do other jobs outside of our MOS because as a chemical MOS, we were a more reactive staff member.
hmm.
Because our whole entire, I mean, it's a mouthful, right? Our job is called the CBRN SME, right?
Yeah.
Chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear.
Hmm.
So, what does that mean in layman's term? Well, if any one of those four things happened on the battlefield, our job was to understand that and brief the commander. How do we either go around that incident or fight through that incident?
Hmm.
So any one of those four incidents is a bad day. That's a bad
Yeah.
day for us, and that's a bad day for the enemy. And so for most, nobody wants to fight through that or around it. No one's really going to play with that kind of stuff. So the probability that you're going to see that on the battlefield is almost close to zero. I'm not going to say zero, but close to zero.
Right. Yeah.
Therefore, we end up being the reactive staff section. So what do you do with the chemical NCO or the chemical officer? I mean, they're able-bodied,
Mm,
full team members. So you
yeah.
find jobs for them to do. So they end up learning the other jobs that are within that organization. And that's why I say, for me, being the chemical officer ended up being one of the greatest opportunities that I ever had because I was able to jump in on that staff organization and be just like my counterpart, the other armor officers, the other infantry officers, because I was in a combat arms organization and be side by side with them and do things that I would have never had the opportunity had I been another, MOS, especially
Yeah.
as a woman, because, women weren't allowed in combat arms position until legally until 2016, right?
Yeah.
And I commissioned in 2001. So I was technically already in the front, if you will,
Hmm.
by being a chemical officer in those organizations when I deployed.
That's really interesting. And so you commissioned 2001, and then when did you get out? But I meant to say, I always like kind of hearing the years that people got in and out because it gives me a frame of reference for some of the things that were going on in their time in.
So I commissioned in 2001 and then I retired in 2021. So I did
Okay.
20 years, just slightly over like 20 years and a couple
Yeah.
months.
It's hard to get it on the day, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like the exact day.
I mean, I could have, but I didn't. There were some things that were going on. I was married at the time. My ex-husband kind of got out around his exact 20 years.
Hmm.
And for me, it just made sense to stay on a couple more months. I was working some things for Soldier for Life, and so staying a couple more months just made sense.
Okay. And so you were uh in chemical until toward the end, and is that when you transitioned into doing Soldier for Life?
No. So for
Okay.
officers, around your 8th year mark of service, there's an opportunity. And how you get to this opportunity, the Army will change how you go about. But for officers, we go by year groups. And that's why
Okay.
oftentimes you'll hear officers walking around, what year group are you? What year group are you? And that's based on the year that you were commissioned. So I was considered an O1 year group. That's the year that I commissioned. So you move in rank by the year that you're commissioned. That's when your files are looked at. That's when you move up. So for me, my 8th year of service, we were afforded the opportunity to potentially move branches within the Army of what we are doing. So in the officer side, we are called branches. The enlisted side is called MOS.
Oh, okay.
And for us, the Army said, "Hey, do you want to stay chemical or would you like to do a functional area?" And at the time, I felt like I had achieved all the things that I wanted to achieve as a chemical officer, which was considered operational for me.
Yeah.
And I was a senior captain, and I was doing, quite frankly, positions that majors were holding down. And I kind of looked at what was available for majors in the chemical corps, and I was like, none of that sounds fascinating to me. I'm already doing it. I don't want to
Yeah.
really stay in this. I was married at the time to another officer. He was an armor officer at the time. And I was just like, none of this sounds fascinating to me. I want to do something different.
Hmm.
And the Army said, well, here's your list of potential places that are, functional areas that you can go to. And one of the functional areas was public affairs. And I said,
Okay.
looking at what that functional area does, that sounds more like me. I'm a storyteller. I like what it could potentially be doing. And so I want to do that. And so I selected it, fingers crossed, hoping that the Army was going to agree with me. And a few months later, I got a notification from the Army that, yep, we agree with your choice. And so that's how I switched over from being a chemical officer to a public affairs officer.
Okay. I have a thought did pop up in my head. So, in getting to experience other jobs when you were chemical, was there anything you did filling in, covering that gap where you were like, oh, I could totally do this job all the time? Like where it was either cush or just really cool to do?
Well, I mean, I think for me, I came into the Army wishing I was actually a tanker. I wanted to be an armor officer. But again, because I came in at a time where women
Right.
aren't authorized to be a somebody in combat arms because I was female, I think for me, the next best thing being in a combat arms unit, I was able to do those jobs at staff level. Now,
Hmm.
while I didn't, jump on a tank or was part of a tank organization at that tactical level, right? I didn't man a tank or do any of that. I did all the staff elements, right? I
Hmm.
was at a brigade level. And for me, I learned a lot. I was afforded the opportunity to command the headquarters and headquarters troop of a brigade armor organization. I was the first female to do that at 1st Brigade, 1st Cav.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I learned a ton. I think and I was, I contemplated maybe switching branches to go aviation. I thought about maybe flying. I didn't do that because I wanted to stay with my husband at the time because he was armor. And,
Hmm.
I looked at a lot of my friends because I'd served time in an aviation unit and they spent a lot of time apart. And so there was a part of me that was like, man, I really want to fly the Apache. I would really like,
Oh yeah.
could it be a tanker and blow things up? Maybe I could go in the air and blow things up, right?
Yeah.
And I had support from my command. I was in an aviation brigade, and both the brigade commander and the deputy commander would have supported my packet to go to aviation. And in fact, they were on their way to Rutgers anyway, so that
Hmm.
I know that if I wanted to do that, I would have had full backing. I just chose not to chase that dream because I picked family first.
Yeah, which is a hard decision. I mean, I wrestle with that probably yearly. I've been in the reserve my whole career, and I joke that I've been in almost 14 years, but it's because I kept planning to quit. Like get out, be done, move on, and then something or a couple somethings kept me in. And so, speaking of aviation, because and I know we'll get in your podcast in a little bit, but have you interviewed Kim Campbell?
I have not.
Okay, well, I'll mention her later. We're trying to get her on. She's one of the people that has to interview during the day, which is it makes it harder to schedule given our schedules. So, but she was a female A-10 pilot. So. Um, Super interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
okay, so you went to public affairs and then tell us more.
So I switched over to public affairs. I was given the opportunity to go to West Point. Like I said, I was dual military at the time. My now ex-husband, he was an academy grad. He was also O1. We had met at the very beginning of our careers. Him and I were brand new second lieutenants at Fort Hood. We met at in processing. We jokingly always said that we were issued to each other because we were brand new second lieutenants at our first duty assignment. We met it in processing and we just developed a friendship, and that friendship turned into dating, turned into an engagement, into a marriage. So my ex-husband and I, we had been together our whole entire career, from day one of our career until the day of retirement. So we spent
Hmm.
20 years together, and unfortunately our marriage, fell apart at the very end. So we did 20 years together. But he was a West Point graduate, and he wanted one of his goals in his career was he wanted to go back to the academy and to teach. And so, part of that is that you've got to set up your timeline as an officer if you want to do that in order to go back to the academy. And so we went back to the academy to teach. He taught in systems engineering. That's the degree that he got out of the academy. He ended up teaching there. And I served in the public affairs department while I was up there. I was also an assistant triathlon coach while I was there, and I had a lot of fun. A lot of people think it's a take a knee job, but it actually isn't. I will say that we probably worked more hours than I did when I was downrange, but it was very rewarding. So that was my first
Hmm.
job as a public affairs officer. It's very, I would say, very strategic in many ways. Strategic, like working at the Pentagon on behalf of the Army, because it is a very forward-facing organization. Everybody, and when I say everybody, I literally mean everybody. Everybody wants to come onto the academy grounds, right? It is a historic location.
It's
uh,
beautiful.
it is very beautiful. And it's not just because it's the academy, it's a historic location if you look at from a historical uh,
Yeah.
standpoint. And then it's also one of the longest academy, right? It's got the history. And then if you look at from a scenic perspective, right? It's beautiful. So there's so many
Hmm.
elements behind it that people want to come to the academy. And then when you look at it from an academic institution, it rivals any tier one organization such as Harvard or Yale or Stanford. It rivals them and then some. So when we say that it produces some of the best, it really does. And then the instructors that go to the academy, I don't think many people know this. We're talking the top 20% of officers and NCOs go to West Point to be able to teach, mentor, and guide those cadets. So you don't get just your average service member that gets to go to the academy to be able to teach and guide those cadets. We're talking the best of the best that get to go back. And it's
Yeah.
very competitive to go back there. And so it's this very unique I wouldn't say society, but a very unique, like family friendly organization tribe. Like I would say like West Point is kind of like a 1950s type community. Like we didn't lock our houses. Like you can literally like
I went to college like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there would be times that I would call my neighbor. I'm like, "Hey, I forgot something. Can you run next door and like pick this up and run it down?" Um, I mean, it was just that type of environment, and you would invite cadets over on the weekends and mentor them and nourish them, and like, "Hey, you want to come over and like have dinner?" But at the same time, like, we're gonna go over your homework or whatever. It was that kind of environment. And so I was able to like dig my hooks in while I was there at West Point and learn how to be a public affairs officer. And normally that level for public affairs was maybe your second or third gig. That was my first gig. So my learning um, launch was through the roof, right? I'm trying to be a public affairs officer and and I was doing it at a place that was very visible. And I enjoyed my time. And then from there, the Army said, "Hey, we got a great idea for you. Let's send you to grad school." So the Army paid for me to go to grad school and they sent me to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And
Wow.
and they paid for my second master's, and I got it in corporate communications and public relations. So they sent me to DC. I went to school. Then I was supposed to be at the Pentagon only for 1 year, and then we were supposed to get reassigned somewhere else. It was supposed to be Hawaii. That kind of fell through. The
Damn.
1 year tour in the Pentagon turned into six, and then I was
Wow.
tiring out. So
And I'm sure there's limitation what you can say, but were you doing, I'm assuming you're doing public affairs work at the Pentagon.
I did.
Okay.
So I actually got assigned to the Office of Chief of Army Public Affairs, and I did quite a few different jobs while I was there. I was an on behalf of the Army. I did strategy and plans while I was there. I was actually one of the deputy executive officers for the actually Army Public Affairs Officer, a 1 star, while I was there. So I was able to bounce around within that office and learn even more and be, the face for the Army and write things for the Army. I mean, I helped write a lot of the messages and was on the teams and staffs of the messages that were being written when we talked about women in combat roles, right? Some of that messaging that was coming out of the Army, part of that was me. That was
That's
right.
so cool.
Transgender in the military when that was first coming out. Part of that messaging that was being done by me and some of yeah, my teammates and colleagues, military working dogs, religious accommodations. So some of those big shifting policies, I was very fortunate that I got to learn how to do some of those big things and talk about that and deal with the Pentagon press corps and talk about those big facing policies on behalf of the Army.
Did you have any in your time, and you don't have to say what it was, that you disagree? Like, were there ever time, maybe there were multiple, were there ever times where you had to put in the same quality of work into something you didn't necessarily agree with?
Honestly, I really didn't. And I think here's why. I think it's a lot has to do with my culture. I think it's my
Yeah.
personality. I'm a Gemini, if you're into astrology. Um,
You might have to explain that one to Nick and I, but I'm sure.
I think for me, I'm very loyal, right? And
Hmm.
and for me, I was very loyal to the Army and to the brand. And for me as a public affairs officer, and, also what I did at the academy was I was a social media chief. Because when I was at the academy in 2010, the Army had just started adopting officially the use of social media. So I
Oh,
helped the Army write some of the initial policies on how we were going to use social media. So I actually won some accolades while I was at the academy on the use of social media. With that being said, I brought some of that mentality in my role as a public affairs officer when I was at the Army Chief of Public Affairs. And I think that's also the role of a public affairs officer, right? Is that you are to always speak with truth. You are always supposed to, bring speed with that truth, and at the same time, protect that truth, right? We're the
yeah.
OPSEC keepers for a reason. right? We don't, the information that we do release to the public, that information doesn't contain things that would be harmful to the military, right?
You know, I hate to admit it, but it's just out of ignorance and not thinking of it that way. But yeah, I'm seeing how you didn't just put information out, but you also had to have the mindset of being very careful to not release the wrong information and carefully choose what things you were going to put out and what things you weren't. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. I'd never thought of it that way. Thank you
Yeah.
for
And so it's
that
like words,
education.
right? Words really do matter. And that was something I had to
Yes.
learn as a public affairs officer. And it's something that I still am constantly learning as a communications professional, that words do matter. How
Yeah.
you use them, when you use them, why you would use one word over another, and
Yeah.
why we always teach, and why your PAO in your unit will say, never say no comment. Because when you say no comment, if you really think about it, when you sit with it, and if you watch somebody and they say no comment, your natural reaction to that is, oh, they're hiding something.
Yeah.
Even though maybe in reality, you honestly have like nothing in your head.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, duh, I don't know, no comment.
Perception's reality, right?
But exactly, the perception is, oh, they're hiding something. I want to dig deeper. So that's why we always train you say, do not say no comment, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's like us and words matter. And well,
100%.
you would know this probably from your Seaburn days, but not saying repeat ever on the radio.
Right.
So it's funny that I don't even say, I'm very much like I like to program myself to make things easier. So I don't even say repeat in civilian life. Of course, now I'm like blasting it over the waves, but like even to my kids, I'll look at them and I'll say again, and then they'll repeat themselves, and then I'm like, okay. And so like even yeah, it's yeah, I'm a huge proponent of words matter. I mean, my background being in mass communication, I focused in journalism, is you know, especially when you're speaking, how you deliver it. But definitely it's almost harder writing it because you don't get to choose the delivery. It's just posted there for someone to read it however. And so yeah, paying attention to the words and then being in sales when I write emails, I'm very careful how I word things. And I always look at it like someone may not notice if I say something wrong, but that's fine. That's erring on the side of caution versus if they pick up on something or take it a certain way, I want to do as much work as I can to avoid that. And I think that applies in a lot of aspects, soldiers transitioning out, putting out resumes. There's definitely certain ways you want to word things, or maybe don't say a certain thing at all, because like we said, perception's reality. So that's fascinating.
Yeah. And like I said, I enjoyed my time in the work that I did. I learned so much. Uh, I will say that um, having the intensity
Hmm.
sometimes, knowing that the things that you are saying is going to be scrutinized was pretty
Ooh,
nerve-wracking. But I did enjoy it, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do that at that level, because not every public affairs officer gets that opportunity to go to the Pentagon,
yeah.
be able to, you know, do that level of engagement. And having had that opportunity and seeing really how the Army functions, and not just the Army, but how it functions within the other services, and why it's a joint world, and why we have all of the layers. It made me appreciate the the layers that we have, why we work the way that we do, and why we function the way that we do. And more importantly, um, why leaders make the decisions that they make. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is, when you spend so much of your time at the tactical level, right? At the corps level,
Yeah.
the division level, the brigade level, you always hear this. You're always like, "Oh man, those people at the Pentagon
I
or
was just thinking about
whatever,
that.
at the Army level, right? They don't know what they're doing. Those jokers, right? Fill in the blank with a bunch of, explicitive words."
Yeah, yeah.
And you think that they're so disconnected from what the boots on the ground is. And while I wouldn't disagree with that per se, but what I would like your listeners to understand is that everything that we were doing at the Pentagon was always for the troops on the ground. That was
Yeah.
always the mindset. But I think what I didn't understand until I got to the Pentagon is it's not because we always looked at man, the man was the chief of staff of the army
Hmm.
for us in the army, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
for the Air Force it'd be the chief of staff of the Air Force, right? It
Yeah.
was like that four-star general. But that's not actually the person that you have to like bow down to, believe it or not. Yes, that person's important, don't get me wrong. But
You're
when
right.
you get to the Pentagon, you realize the person that you really need to pay attention to is actually the Secretary of the Army. It's the civilian. It's the civilian leadership. So it's the Secretary of the Army, the Joint
Hmm.
Staff, and then ultimately Congress and the White House, right? It's that
Yeah.
leadership. And I didn't understand that until I got to the Pentagon and I saw how policy and paperwork and relationships and telephone calls and emails and walking around the building, how all of that works together.
You really saw behind the curtain, it sounds like, and
I
how
did.
the sausage is made, as so to speak.
Yeah, when you go into these different meeting rooms, especially when you're just a major, it's crazy. Think about it. When you're at Fort Hood, right? I spent 10 years at Fort Hood. Majors, lieutenant colonels, colonels, like they're the top dog. Like people run out of their way. They're like, "Oh, sir, ma'am."
Oh yeah.
At the Pentagon, I was like a private. No one could care less about Major Nunn or Colonel Nunn. Like you're just another like,
Well, I was thinking about that when you said like you were just a major, and in my head, I'm like, I drilled with civil affairs at one point. That's the most I ever saw that many majors in one place, to include being in Afghanistan. So when you're saying just a major, I'm like, well, damn, like, imagine your normal company level stuff at drill every weekend. It's like I'd go months, if not years, without ever seeing a major.
yeah.
And so that, yeah, but that is quite the perspective for sure.
I mean, I would stand in line at the Pentagon to get, coffee at Starbucks, and there'd be a one
Hmm.
star standing behind me, like, "Hey, hi, how you doing, sir?" Right? It's like totally normal. Like
Yeah,
you walk around the Pentagon with so much brass, right? One star, two star, three star, and so who am I as a major? Like it's being a
yeah,
private. And so, but you really do see that sausage making, and it was never again about oh screw those guys at the ground level. It was never about. It was always about them. But because that policy was so important, I think the idea and understanding how that gets done was never pushed down to that lower level. And that's where that disconnect is.
yeah, yeah. And well, it's indicative of such an enormous entity that there's just going to be disconnect where one side thinks the other side doesn't understand them. And to a degree, they're right, but to a degree, they're wrong. And they don't realize, it's kind of like you do so much for your kids and then they rail against your decisions. And then it's just like, well, actually, I do this because I love you,
Right.
but I don't want to say that because it sounds like so-and-so's parents don't love them. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But yeah, that's fascinating. Now, was there anything? Well, one, you being at the Pentagon instead of 1 to 6 years, did you think you were ever going to get out of there? And two, did you stay that long because you wanted to? Like, did you have any say in the matter, or did the Army just kind of keep you there, maybe based on merit?
No, it was really because of um, the dual army couples program, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because my ex-husband was armor turned
Right.
cyber officer,
Hmm.
me being public affairs,
Hmm.
and we are both off cycle. So what would happen is cyber would say, "Hey, it's time to move you," and then they would look in the file and say, "Oh, you're dual army. Well, she's public affairs. Oh, wait, she just got reinstated at in the DC area. Okay, well, I guess we can't move you, so we'll just find you another job." And then a year or two would come up and it's my turn. And then they would say, "Okay, time to move you." And they're like, "Oh, you're dual military. Oh, well, his assignment just got locked in." And so that's what we were doing. We were ping-ponging back and forth.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like we were trying to stay in DC. It just that's kind of how it happened. And
Yeah.
at the very end, actually, my last 3 years, I had just pinned lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
So I was major promotable. I was just waiting for my number to come up so that I can pin on lieutenant colonel. And the Army actually was like, "It is time for you to move. We're not going to play this ping pong anymore. We don't care. We're going to separate you." Right? 'Cause
Yeah.
the Army can do that, right? They try to keep you
Yeah.
together, but they will separate you. And so they're like, "We don't care anymore. We've been nice. We're going to separate you too."
Yeah.
And I'm an older mom. So I we chose to have kids later in life. So I was a major by the time we had our first child. I was
Hmm.
almost 35, literally a month away from turning 35 with our first child, and I was
Okay.
almost 40 by the time I had my second child.
Hmm.
And my second child, he was just a few months old when they're like, "We're going to PCS you somewhere." And I'm like, and I remember I was just fighting this because I was nursing him. I'm like, You're gonna move me," and I have this like little one. I was just
Yeah.
devastated, and
Yeah.
so we, worked this out as a family. We prayed. We talked about it. What are the options? And they're like, "Well, you could go to, the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt." Or Sinai, Egypt, in Egypt.
Oh,
And I was like, for a year. And I'm like, I don't like option one or two. I was like, is there any other option?
God.
Um, and the reason why I wasn't really crazy about that, not only because it was Egypt, but also it was for a one-star general for the Australian Army. And I'm like, what is that one-star general in the Australian Army going to do for me as a career development? Not to
Yeah.
say that that job wasn't amazing. Actually, I knew a couple of my colleagues that had that job previously.
Yeah.
It was more of a protocol job versus a PAO type job. They said they had a great job, had a good time, but I'm like, cool, but
Right.
this
What?
Australian one star wouldn't have pull in our army. So what was it going to get me on the backside?
Yeah. Well, and that's a big sacrifice when you got kids that young, especially the one of them. Obviously the other one was about 5, but I mean that's still young kids.
Yes.
Um,
So I was like, can we do
yeah.
something else? I was like, how about this? Can you send me to Korea? I'm like, I'm first generation Korean American. I was like, can you send me to Korea? And my mother's Korean. And so we talked about it. We're like, hey, my mom could like come visit months at a time. I still have
Yeah.
extended family in Korea, like extended family. She could come with the little ones. She could hang out with the family.
Yeah.
We kind of like we're wargaming this, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, and my assignment manager was like, yeah, I think we can make that happen. And I was like, oh, by the way, I want a 3-star command, not a 2-star command. Because in my head, I was like, I am too old to be playing 2-star level command and going to the field.
Oh yeah.
Then, like, let me work a 3-star level command. And so we had it all worked out. I was supposed to go to Korea, and not that I really wanted it, but I was like, if you're adamant about moving me, at least let me send me to a country where I understand the culture, the language. My mother
Yeah.
could come, she would totally just be fine. She'd be happy. Like we got extended family over there. Like we could do this.
Okay.
And I thought we locked it in. My RFO never came. I was waiting and waiting. And you know that if an RFO doesn't come in, something happened.
Yeah.
Finally got a hold of my branch manager, and he was like, "So about that assignment, I kind of messed up, and I gave it to somebody else.
What?
Uh, what do you want? Like, can we work this out? Do you want the 2-star level?" I was like, "No, I'm not interested." He's like, "It's in the same location. You're going. It's the same." I was like, "I don't care that we're at the same location. It was never about the location. It's about
Yeah.
what you're asking that person to do." That
Hmm.
was my whole point. I know
Yeah.
what they're going to be doing. I just don't want field time. I'm going to be honest. Like, you can laugh at me all you want, or you can say that I'm, trying to scapegoat out. I'm like, I've had enough field time. I've had enough combat time. I'm just tired of that. I have
Yeah.
3 years left in the army. My body's broken. Can I just not do that crap anymore?
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah, I feel that.
And so, and I was like, look, I tell you what, can you just get me an assignment somewhere in the DC area? And I don't even care if it's even in the dungeon licking stamps.
Hmm.
And it doesn't even have to be a lieutenant colonel's position. I am done. I am done. When I hit my 20, I'm going to be done. So they looked, and that's how U.S. Army Soldier for Life position came up. Their public affairs officer had just moved on. They're like, hey, it's actually an O4 position. It's a major slot. If you do this, you basically are killing your career. You won't be able to progress, because you're going to be holding down a major slot. You're a lieutenant colonel. This is not even career progressing for you. You will never make O 06, even if you got top block. in your evaluations. If you're like the best thing since sliced bread for the next 3 years, there's no way that you can career progress. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I really don't care. I just give me 3 years as a lieutenant colonel, and I will go on my merry way. The Army can release me. Um, so I think the Army thought that they were going to do me wrong, but the irony of it was probably the best job that the Army could have gave me. I had the
Hmm.
most amount of fun. I built so much with that. I had an established network. I built a podcast. I made lots of friends. I was able to travel for the Army. I was the face of the Army yet again. And so, while maybe the Army thought that they were giving me a bad assignment, I actually thought it was one of the best assignments next to Troop Command.
And I want to hear about it. So you start in kind of day one. Um, did things look in disarray? Did nobody know what to do, or did they already kind of have the train moving and you helped guide it?
No,
It's a
so it's an
terrible
established
analogy.
organization. U.S.
Okay.
Army Soldier for Life was actually created in 2012. Um,
Okay.
it was uh, it was created because there was a white paper that was done, and actually one of the guys that helped create it was actually one of my colleagues. We were actually troop commanders together.
Oh,
He's a 2002 graduate out of the academy. Chris Manglemont, him and I were troop commanders. We actually served at Fort Hood together in 1st Brigade, 1st Cav. Him and I were actually now retired General Funk, but at the time it was Colonel Funk. And when we were at the Pentagon together, Chris had said, "Hey, I'm doing this white paper, and um, based on this information that's coming back, we're going to create an organization, and I think I'm going to call it Soldier for Life." A lot of the idea came from Marine for Life, the ideology, once a Marine, always a Marine. But it was answering the mail specifically to General Odierno has passed on. He passed away from cancer a few years ago. But when he
hmm.
was the chief of staff of the Army back then in 2012,
That's when I came in. I remember he was one of the names I had to memorize. We had to memorize the chain of command all the way to the president.
so General Odierno asked the following question: Why is it that our service members, especially our combat service members, why is it that when they separate and they become veterans, why is it that they cannot get a job with all the skills, with all these soft skills, with all the skills that they have? Why is it that they cannot get a job? Because at the time, and it's been so long now, I forget the statistics. The unemployment rate in the US, it was a little high at the time, but the veteran unemployment rate was twice the rate of the national unemployment rate. And he's
I
like, I
believe
don't
that.
get this. He's like, I don't understand this. If America says that they love their troops and they support their troops, why is it that our troops are not getting their jobs? Like it doesn't make sense to me. So how can we do better? What are we missing? Where is the disconnect? So born from that was U.S. Army Soldier for Life, specifically tackling employment, education, and health and wellness. So Soldier for Life was a strategic organization to build a bridge, layman's term, matchmaking. Army meet organizations,
Hmm.
organizations meet Army
Yeah.
in those three tiers or those buckets: employment, education, health, and wellness. How do we help organizations understand the Army? Army, how do we help you understand the organizations that are out there so that when service members transition, they do it well? And over the years, obviously the mission, how we're doing it has improved. Some years, maybe we hit the mark a little bit better. Other years, not so much. You could talk to anybody. Some people say TAP, Transition Assistance Program, was amazing. Other people say, nah, not so much.
I,
And
I
the
I
answer to
I
that,
bet the difference comes in the execution because I could see where you're interacting with some people that really know the game. I mean, it's just like when I call TRICARE. It's like sometimes I joke I have to call 3 times to get somebody that's incredibly helpful, takes care of me in 5, 10 minutes, whereas everybody else is trying to read out of a book. Anything they didn't understand, they just told me I couldn't do it. And I'm like,
right,
that's not
right.
so, sorry. You were saying.
So, with that, this program has evolved over time. And so, like I said, it started in 2012. I joined the program in September of 2018. That's when I actually showed up to the organization. When I got there, every October, the Army has a annual meeting. It's actually called AUSA, Army United States of America annual meeting. It's hosted every October. It's at the Walter E. Convention Center in DC. It is the meeting that every Army organization attends. And it happens at the beginning of the fiscal year for a reason. It's where the Chief of Staff of the Army is at, the Secretary of the Army is at, all of the top brass is at, and it's where the message for the year is released. This is the focus of the Army. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going to lay it out. This is how we're going to achieve our objectives, etc. And AUSA, that's what it's known, right? AUSA
Hmm.
is the meeting. It's been around for a very long time. I got there in September. AUSA is in October. I show up and they're like, hey, we have a booth at AUSA. But everybody here that's in this office, we're about to shift out. Everyone's kind of leaving. We're getting new people.
Hmm.
And none of us really know how to run the booth, let alone set up the booth, run the booth, and what we should do. But we got to be there and be present and, you know, be forward facing and represent
Yeah, yeah.
Soldier for Life. And they're like, you're PAO. So what do you think we should do? Oddly enough, I've actually had years of experience dealing with AUSA. I did it for West Point when I was at West Point. I actually
Oh,
booth. And the one thing I didn't share with y'all when I was at the Army Chief of Public Affairs, that was actually one of the duties that we did. We actually, in the background, are the planners for AUSA on behalf of the Army. That's
I
one of
guess that makes sense. Yeah.
I was very intimately knowledgeable of AUSA. And so I was like, huh, well, you are in luck. I actually know how to do event planning and how to set up a booth and know what to do. And I actually know how to do it for this particular event because I've been doing it. So they're like, great, pin the tail on this donkey. You get to do this event. And so I, so I basically, the ship was already in motion. Everything was already in play except for this one particular event. And we kicked it off and we had a great time. Um, from there, it was just, hey, Olivia, what else should the public affairs officer be doing? And I think I lucked out that I was working for a director. He's also now retired, Colonel Ferris. And he pretty much allowed his directors, because we're broken up into sections, where he
Hmm.
allowed his lieutenant colonels to kind of um, run our sections in a way that best made sense, that made Soldier for Life be forward facing, interact with America, organizations that really got our message out. And because in the past, the PAO hadn't been utilized in that way, and I made a pitch for it, I was like, hey, if we're supposed to be giving messages and if we're supposed to be out there, why wouldn't I also be doing that instead of just sitting in the office every single day?
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to travel with the teams, go out there, shake hands, be involved out in the community, make relationships. And I had a great time and, help write some of the messaging on why, you know, a veteran is valued, why companies should be hiring a veteran, why military spouses are just as powerful and impactful in the hiring process for organizations.
Yeah, I think that's a super slept on topic is military spouses. And I was talking to my wife the other night actually, and what we're talking about even for this podcast is having her on and Nick's fiance, far as just what was your side of this whole thing like when I deployed, and even outside of that with drill weekends. And so I think that's great that that's a topic that was hit because I think it's way undercovered in terms of the attention everything gets.
Yeah. And so I had a great time. And born from the time that I was there, a podcast series was launched. Lots of travel. Uh, because of what I was doing, I actually received an invitation to go to Australia, present about Soldier for Life. So I actually got to travel to the other side of the world, to down under, and present down there. Um, and literally, right when we came back, I think like a couple weeks later after I came back, the world shut down. We went into
Oh yeah.
um, And but yeah, it was probably one of the greatest organizations that I worked for. Um, and I'm just lucky that it was the last organization for me.
I am curious where you started this portion of it with why are veterans not getting jobs, that kind of thing. What is the or a reasons that you are finding in working on all this?
Well, we could go on.
Yeah, I don't mean to make a 3 hour
No, no, no.
episode,
I
but you've
think
got some
there's
really
so
good
much.
knowledge.
There, a few things. One, I say this with love and not malice.
Okay.
You have to own your transition.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You cannot have the mentality that people, organizations owe you. They do not. You have to own your transition. You have to do
Hmm.
the due diligence and do the work. And it's going to be hard. The other part that I will say is that you can prepare for every part of your transition, but it's still going to hit you. And what I mean by that is the emotional, mental part of transition will hit you. You can prepare for the physical part of transition, and that's the part that everyone's excited about, right? Because you do the medical part, you prepare for where you're physically moving to, the job that you're going to get, all of that. Everyone's excited because everyone gets excited about, yeah, I don't have to get text messages from a platoon sergeant anymore. And I don't have to get up at oh dark 30 anymore and take that BS anymore. Yay. Like everyone's excited about that. Not to have to
Yeah.
shave anymore, put on the crazy uniform, and like all of that is exciting. Trust me, right? That's not the part that you have a hard time with.
Hmm.
It is the spiritual, emotional part of transition. And this is where it hits you. It hits you 9 months, 12 months, 15 months. And when it hits you, and people could tell you, and you're going to go, yeah, 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 I got it. I got it. I'm going to be prepared for it. But I say this to you now, you will not be prepared for it because
Yeah.
it's like when you tell your kids like it's gonna hurt when you fall down.
They're like, nah,
Slow
what
down
do
on
you
your
know?
bike. It's gonna hurt when you fall off, and your kid's gonna, yeah, I know, Dad, I know, I know, and they're gonna fall off and they're gonna cry their head off, and you're like, see, I told you so.
Honestly,
And it's
the example that comes to mind for me is either having kids or getting married. When people say it's hard, or they say it can be hard, and you're like, yeah, I get it. Like there's hard, but you just don't know what that hard looks like
yes,
until you have those kids or you're in that marriage where, yeah, I mean, there's arguments we've had and things we've fortunately come through on the other side of dealing with, and but like asking her to marry me, let alone day one of marriage, I never would have figured out in my head that any of this was how it goes down. So yeah, that's a really good because a lot of people who are veterans or transitioning out, I should say, are married and or have kids. And so yeah, almost relating it to that and being like, remember when you thought you knew what it'd be like to raise kids and then you found out you were totally wrong? Kind of how the transition thing goes. So let's look at these resources, check out all of that.
hard because you don't understand how hard it is until it fully hits you.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm trying to explain. You have been in that uniform for however long, whether it's 4 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And there is something about that uniform that is recognizable, understood, and it comes with a level of understanding and it explains your ability, competence, and capability. When you walk
Hmm.
in through that door, it has your name, your rank, your accoutrements, right? Your tabs, all of that. So without you even saying a word, I can assess, well, that guy is squared away or not,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to say one word, and I could say that Joe is either ate up or not.
Yeah.
And your rank will tell me how much I can dish out to you. Like I could give an E3 this much, and I could give an E8 this much, right?
Yeah.
And that's all based on what I see on your uniform. I
But
could say
you,
this person has this much competence or the ability to handle, trauma shit because they went to combat versus not, right?
right.
Well, here's the problem. You leave, You just have
Yeah, a
there's
polo or a button up or a
nothing that
t-shirt. Yeah.
says you are a military service member. I
I,
don't have a
I,
name tag. I don't have any of my capability written on me.
yeah. Now, do you think a part of it too? Because I was kind of thinking about this as we're talking. Um, I hesitate to use this phrase, but it's kind of applicable, but it's also not. You get a lot of stuff handed to you in the military, and by that I mean here's what to do and how to do it. Now, I know, understand there's poor leadership where they might give you what to do and not tell you how to do it, but you got more resources than a lot of the job world to figure out what you're supposed to do, or you can ask a buddy or all these kinds of things. Do you think losing that when you go on the civilian side, especially like it, I almost think like if you had a quote unquote unit that was not in the military, but you transition to this unit as you get out, and somebody tells you how to find a job and to do it, like I would think that would almost be a whole new level of productivity. If
Yeah.
you're, oh, I'm gonna get smoked if I don't get a job. It's like, yeah, dude, shit's real.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, I'm out now and I'm on my, I'm creating the missions for myself. Well, I've never written a mission before.
Yes. What you just talked about is structure. You
Yeah,
have structure every single day,
perfect way
right?
to say it.
You will not have that structure anymore. The
Mhm.
guardrails of your life are completely removed. And like I said, when it's first gone, you're like, freedom. And then when
Yeah.
you realize, oh my gosh, I really like that. I really like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do without it. And when that sinks in, and when you realized, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with myself, and I don't know who to ask because you don't have a unit,
Yeah.
right? And your
Yeah.
buddies who were your buddies aren't around you anymore because they're not in that phase of your life with you anymore.
Right.
Panic sits in. And this is where it becomes dangerous. And this is why we have such a high veteran suicide rate. And I'm not just saying it's just that. There's a lot of other things that impact that.
Oh yeah, I'm
I don't
following you
want to
though. Yeah.
simplify it as to that's just the only reason.
I think it's a big thing though. I think it's an enormous percentage, honestly. Because if you
Yeah.
can't get your job life squared away, a lot of stuff falls to the wayside. You know, depression sets in. You're having trouble caring about other things that might actually make you happy or that matter, like your family. And just, yeah, I think it's a big cause of the spiral. I think you could say. I don't know what percent, but I think it's a large percent.
And then, we talked about your about family earlier. So you had a structure with your family. Your family was used to operating a certain way, right? You're gone, you come home. You're gone, you come home. And let's be honest, you have learned to survive and live a certain way with your spouse in that type of lifestyle,
Hmm.
good or bad or indifferent. What ends up happening is now you're home all the time. And my new partner, my current partner, he talks about it's the honeymoon phase. You were constantly honeymoon phase, right? In, out. And
Oh,
just when problems start arising, you're back out the door. Whether that door is deployment, field problem,
yeah.
TDY, or whatever. And then longing sets in, right? Oh my gosh, my husband's been gone for like 2 months or, 3 weeks or whatever. You forget about what it was that your spouse ticked you off about because you long for them, you miss them. They come back, you forget what it is, you just miss them, you just forget about it, you schmooze it over. And just when, Nick pisses you off again and you're about to deal with it, out the door he goes again on the next training exercise, right? So it's this constant honeymoon thing.
That's fat.
Now,
I've never heard anything about this.
now you're at the end. Nick's
Yeah.
not going anywhere. There's no more training. There's no more TDYs. He's
Hmm.
you're looking at his face every single day. And that's the reality of a lot of marriages. You're now looking at your spouse every single day, and now you're coming to grips of like, is this the person that I want to be with? Because I now realize I'm different. He's different. And
If
is this
sorry,
where I need to be? Can I be
yeah,
here? Right? And a lot of marriages don't survive.
and I don't intend to pry, but where you'd mentioned, and we can cut this part out if you don't want to get into this part, but where you talked about your marriage falling apart toward the end of both y'all's careers. I mean, is this a portion? Are you speaking from experience on this to a degree?
Yes and no, right? A lot of my friends have been in that situation. For me,
Mm,
my divorce came out of left field. Um, I was tracking like we are gonna retire. We have this great retirement plan, and for us, the idea of where we're gonna go ended up just shifting. It
mm,
was, I think for us, it was trauma, and that's the other part. Everything that you've carried in your service now is coming to the surface. And that was for both him and I.
yeah,
I like to talk about the box and your box can only deal with so much,
yeah.
right? I had been assaulted by my platoon sergeant during combat in my first deployment. I opened the box up, I put that in, I shut the lid. And there was a long period of my life that I actually forgot about it. And it wasn't until I was a field grade officer that I just actually randomly remembered about it because we were talking about it. And my memory just snapped. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was a, I'm one of those females that had been physically assaulted. Like it just came back,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like my brain had did something to protect myself from that memory. Um, and once it came back, it came flooding back, and there's no way of putting it back in.
And
Um,
I know someone, a female, similar story, something like that happened, and then they just remembered one day.
yeah. My three deployments, I had near misses of dying. I never really talked about them. A lot has to do with I felt like I didn't have the right to talk about it. Again, I was a female in a combat arms organization. I wasn't a door kicker. I did convoy operations, and I felt like I lost friends or my friends lost friends. And because I wasn't an armor and infantry guy doing these dangerous missions, and therefore, because my missions weren't that important, my near misses of almost dying weren't that important, is how I
Hmm.
looked at it. Because there's such bravado of like, oh, I'm this and I'm that. And because I'm a woman and I'm not a guy and I'm not infantry and I don't have a cord, I don't have this, um, I felt like my stories didn't matter, so I never talked about them. I just kind of
Hmm.
brushed it off like, oh yeah, there was a rocket attack that landed near me. I just never reported. I never said it. I just never talked about it, or I didn't talk about the ambush that I went through,
Hmm.
or my own um moral injury, right? The decisions that I had to make to get my convoy out of a situation and the choice that I had to make to get out of that, right? I just kind of like we, we just got through it, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's open the box, put it in, shut it. And by the time I got through to the end to my retirement, and now with this unexpected divorce, and he had his own that he had to deal with, I, my mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, my body couldn't take it anymore. Like I was done. And I could no longer hold anything in that box. My box just said, "You're done. Everything's going to come to the surface. Everything
Hmm.
you have been trying to hide, everything that you've been trying to not deal with, you are going to deal with it now as you're trying to retire." And by the way, retiring from the military is a big life altering in itself. That is a
It,
big life altering movement in itself. And it set me to my knees. It sent me to rock bottom, and I started planning my way and was almost successful in exiting my way out of this life.
mhm.
But ultimately, to answer your question about understanding how marriages fall apart, yes, while some of it is very similar to my own story, so many of my friends have gone through that story. It's why I'm familiar with that because I've had discussions with other friends about why their marriages have fallen apart, because that is a very similar thread about why marriages fall apart, right?
Yeah.
They become strangers. And and I say this all the time. No one wakes up and says, I'm going to blow up my marriage and I don't want it anymore. Nobody ever does that, right?
Mhm.
Nobody ever gets married because they don't love that person. They get married because they do truly love that person. your marriage falls apart continuously over time and slowly over time because it's death by a thousand paper cuts. And
Yeah.
that's when it comes glaringly obvious is at the very end when you're now at the situation where you're like, oh, you are truly different. And I am
Yeah.
too. And are we either going to fix this or are we at a point where like we can't fix this?
Hmm.
And so I
How
think
did,
that along with transition and everything else and the anxiety of trying to find a job, just kind of impacts everything.
yeah. Um, I just have so many questions, but I also don't want to keep you too long.
I mean, I'm good. So
Okay, okay. So how did your lens ch so what I'm picturing is you're getting all this experience, which obviously translates to knowledge as well. So how is that shaping the lens? I mean, your divorce, all that trauma you experienced, uh, uh, a near-death experience by your own account, not to mention the other ones that weren't. So how is that shaping your lens and motivating you into which we'll get to next, what you did when you got out, because obviously you're a business owner now and you got a podcast and everything. How does that motivate and shape your lens with how you're viewing things today?
I think for me, um, I was fortunate enough that I had a couple, really good friends that checked in on me. One of them is, still very near and dear to my heart. He is the co-founder of Veteran Success Resource Group, which unfortunately right now the organization is not doing anything just because, he's got things that he needs to take care of. But many people in the DC area is very familiar with VSRG, with the work that I've done in that nonprofit. I'm the event planner for Burbiz. It's a play on word, Bourbon and Business. It's a networking event. It's a conference that I created last year for them. And he checked on me when I was at my lowest point, and he reminded me of my purpose and what I was capable of. And for me, that created a mind shift. It was not just him, but just him, prayer. I spent a lot of time praying, a lot of time journaling. I did and just therapy. I had, a couple therapists, spent a lot of time in therapy. My family, my mom and my sister were big parts of my healing journey. And I realized that I didn't want to hide necessarily what I went through. Um, I ended up sharing my journey with a couple people. Um, I posted a few things online, and the messages that I got from that was overwhelming. And overwhelming in a good sense of how not just about being brave about it, but that they saw themselves in my story. Maybe
Hmm.
not exactly one for one, but they saw commonality in it and how just by me sharing what I was going through, it made them feel better about what they were going through. And so they were willing to go seek help themselves or that they were willing to go do something different for themselves. And I think for me, it kind of gave me an aha moment that um, I didn't necessarily have that for myself when I was at that low point where I was looking at somebody else or watching somebody else and I got that inspiration. So I figured if I could be that for somebody where it could give them the breath and space, then I think then that would be a good thing, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
then that could be a healing spot for somebody. And what I've learned is that healing is not linear. It's trauma is something that you're going to continuously heal from. Just because you learn to step away from suicide one time doesn't mean that it's one and done. It's a constant evolving process and you're probably I mean, I know personally for me it is a constant battle. It's something that I deal with all the time. Sometimes it's easier than others. Um, and I think that is the fallacy, I think, in the conversation of dealing with mental health. I think people think that, oh, if I've saved that person from trying to take their life one time, then we're good. Then we don't have to worry about,
Yeah.
John or Susie ever wanting to take their life again. That's not necessarily true. Um, and the other part that I've learned is people are really good at hiding how they truly feel.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a communicator. I do share a lot of my life online. I'm a communications expert. I'm a social media manager. I manage other people's social media. So I'm good at getting snapshots in time where that one moment in my day I felt great. And that's what I share. Because I don't want to be a Susie Downer all day long or a Debbie
Right.
Downer, right? All day
Yeah.
long. So I share that like one snapshot that I felt relatively good. But to be honest, majority of my day I don't feel great. And so um I spend majority of my time in a lot of reflection, a lot of like deep in my head, wondering if I'm good enough, if I made an impact, if what I'm doing even makes a difference or if it matters to anybody. Um, would anybody even care if I was still around? I mean, those are the constant, you know, ideas that swirl in my head.
Yeah. I struggled with those thoughts before, and yeah, it's not a one and done, get rid of them kind of thing. Um, so as we're discussing you transitioning out, if you could go back in time to the day you signed up, what would be the one piece of advice you would give yourself to get you through the 20 years, or even through the transition for that matter?
That's so hard.
I know
if
it's a
I,
it's a
and
rough
this is why I
question.
say that, right?
Yeah.
If I could have looked into the magic 8 ball or the looking glass and knew that I was going to get divorced, then my answer would have been, you know, follow my passion in wanting to be an aviator, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a part of me that's like, man, I really wish that I was flying airplanes and, helicopters right now and shooting things out of the sky, because how cool would that have been? Um, but how would I have known that at the end of my career that I would have been divorced, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then there's this other part of me that's like, that wants to tell myself that regardless of how much you love this person, and regardless if you knew that you're going to be divorced or not, go ahead and still chase that dream and just hope and hold on really tight that you're still going to be together. And I think that's a really hard thing to tell yourself. And I say that because women are um so giving, right? We tend to be the nurturer, the caregiver, and we tend to like lose ourselves so easily and we love so deeply. And so it's so easy for us to say like, nope, we see potential in this person, in our partner, and we're going to give it our
hmm
all. So, there's a part of me that says, I don't know if I would go back in time and believe it enough in myself to still make that decision. Um, but because there's this part of me that says that I am where I'm supposed to be because that's the road that I was supposed to take to get to this point.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's this other part of me that's like, maybe I should have never went into the army and I missed my whole entire calling. And I should have been like, I should have gone into stunt work, right? Because I'm such an adrenaline junkie. Like, I want to be able to master, like, being able to drive cars. I mean, I love driving my car really fast, but I used to do that in college totally illegally. But
Oh, me
doing
too.
it from
Yeah.
a professional perspective of being able to, like, shoot bow and arrows and shoot out of a driving car and like drive it super fast and spin it around and um, you know, do all kinds of crazy stunts and do it for a living. So that's kind of hard.
What kind of car do you drive? Not to totally derail this conversation.
I drive a Tesla right now, but when I was in college, I had a little Toyota MR2 that I totally souped up and
What? Like
yeah,
a 93 or early 90s or
a
late
91
80s?
Toyota MR2 non-turbo
Oh,
that I
do you have
made
the
a turbo.
T-top?
Yep, that I
And
made
you
a
made it a
turbo.
turbo? Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
always dreamed
So
of
that was before Fast and the Furious came out. And of course, when Fast and the Furious came out, then everybody was doing it. Because I grew up on the
yeah,
West Coast, right? So I
yeah,
already knew about that kind of stuff before it became a thing on the East Coast.
yeah,
And I ended up painting it bright hot pink towards the end because it went through stages, right? But
yeah, oh
before it was
yeah.
pink, it was green and it was decked out, blacked out windows. Nobody knew a girl was driving it. And it was before I had personal plates. My plate said girl racer, but before that, no one knew it was a girl that was racing it. And I used to take pink slips all the time. And
And
then
that's
guys
not
would just be so upset that a girl just totally creamed their ass all over the ground. So,
that's not an easy car to drive mid-engine.
no, I loved it. Like I kicked ass all over it.
I want, yeah, I'd still would own one of those today. That's incredible. All right, maybe I'll start a car podcast. We'll go into more details about that later. But okay, so then, um, okay, so now you're out and you've got all the skill, knowledge, hopefully some purpose mixed in there too. Um, Kind of tell us. We don't have to go into great detail. I'll try to keep my questions at bay to one degree or another. So then, how did you get to where you are now?
So when I got out, I went into government contracting right away. I hit the easy button.
Yep.
I got a job offer, and I was still trying to like figure out what I was trying to do, and that was an easy button because I was still going through my divorce. And I took a government contracting job as a public affairs officer for a company, and it was good. The pay was good. It allowed,
Hmm.
it's a remote job. I was working from home, and I was trying to figure out my life. And I did that for about a year and a half. And in that process, I met a woman through another veteran, a friend, and she was working for a substance use company down in Texas. And she was like, "Hey, can you do some 1099 work?" And I was like, "Well, yes, I can because I own my own LLC." And and she's like, "Great." And so she brought me on a short contract to do some, communications, branding stuff for her organization. And she's like, "I love this." She was like, "Could I bring you on full time?" And so we talked about the contract, and I was like, "I'm making way more money working for her and traveling with her on
Having
my
more
own
fun?
time, yeah, like on my own schedule,
Yeah.
than this contracting job." And my boss is like total micromanager, and she's not cool.
Ugh.
And I don't like the job, and I'm not going anywhere. Like there's no way to get pay raises. The contract is about to end. Like I have mass anxiety. And they're now wanting us to come in off of remote work and sit in a skiff. And I was like, ugh. So I left government contracting and just went all in for myself, working for myself, being a 1099 contractor.
Good for you.
That went for about a year.
Hmm.
Money was great. Things were going well. And then that company went under
Hmm.
quietly. Nobody knew. And they owed me quite a bit of money. And my company went under with that. So I scrambled, um, you know, because I'm still like learning and building my company at the same time.
Right.
And that was my only source of income. I ended up being unemployed for 9 months, not for the sake of not trying to find um,
Yeah.
clients. And that I ended up hitting rock bottom again, dealt with a lot of anxiety, depression, suicide ideation. Just felt like, here I go again. I'm just such a loser. I can't figure this out. I can't make this work. I'm
Oh
like
yeah.
their lieutenant colonel that retired from the army, can't be anything, do anything. Um, and the economy had just started tanking. This was early 2004 or 2024. And I finally scored a job with Leidos in another government contracting position and I ended up working for them for about 13 months. And so then and because I had been unemployed for 9 months, I lost a lot. A lot of my bills went into collection. A lot of people didn't know because I didn't share this. I couldn't give Christmas to my kids. Um, there were a couple days that I couldn't feed them. People didn't know that. The only reason why I was able to keep my house is because my retirement check is paying for this. But like it was pretty rough. But I didn't really
Yeah.
share that. Like out of pride, um, out of shame, and it was pretty devastating. So I ended up getting another job. I worked for 13 months and things were going great. Our contract had actually just been renewed, and then Doge came along.
Mm,
Doge cut our contract. And unfortunately, our whole entire staff got cut because Doge cut that contract.
mm,
Um, then I went, I think, for another 6 or so months of unemployment. Um, Again, not to say that I wasn't looking. I probably submitted a couple hundred resumes out
oh
there.
yeah, I've been there. I know how it goes.
In multiple, interviews, callbacks, but just, just didn't go. I finally got some temp work this holiday season. Um, and then I have one current job right now, but it doesn't we're just waiting on the contract to kind of, pick back up. Uh,
Hmm.
it's kind of in limbo, so we'll see where that goes. So I may not have a job come next week. So that's kind of been my life. And in the background, in my own personal company, I've had a client or two. I have one client right now that I'm helping him with his social media. I'll have another client. She kind of comes and goes when she needs stuff. But, with the economy that the way that it is, a lot of people just don't want to spend on communications, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's been increasingly difficult. And then you've got the advancement of AI where people are just like, oh, I don't need you. I could just use AI. And I'm like, sure, you can, 100%.
Yeah, I look at it though as like AI just is never going to be able to deliver what a human being can. And there's just so much, especially given your experience and the different ways you've applied that experience in different avenues, is I would just think. And the other thing too, I would think is when the economy is down, people are doing less activities and they're on social media more, meaning that that'd be the time to bump it. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, you're obviously the expert over me, but I would think that if things get more expensive, people do less. They're on their phones more, is what that means. So anyway. Um, well, I mean, there's definitely resources. If there's any resources we can help you with, whether it's growing the business or finding another niche that the next step in your journey, we'd love to help you with that.
Yeah.
You've been awesome to have on here. And I do want to mention you have a podcast, so let's talk about that in a minute. I know it's getting late. I apologize.
So in this, like trying to figure out, it's always what do you want to be when you grow up? When you leave the army or the military in
Yeah,
general, the question that you're always asking yourself is, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I've
still
been
ask myself that question
yeah,
this
and I've been
day.
asking myself that question for the past 4 years. And this is what I've said. Transition leads to transformation. And transformation is forever evolving for each one of us, right? And it will never stop evolving. When I left the army, I got into pageantry. I've last titled in 2023. I was Miss Virginia Petite. I went to the national level and actually placed in top 12. Um, I've taken time away from pageantry because it's very expensive. And so I do plan to go back and compete, but for now, I'm taking a break. Pageantry has been great from the perspective of building confidence and just tapping back into your feminine power. Those are things that are just so different from being in uniform. And then now I'm into bodybuilding. I have a second bodybuilding competition here coming up. But in all of that, one of the things that a lot of people urged me to do was go back to the mic. Um, like I said, earlier, I helped develop one of the very first podcast series, the U.S. Army Soldier for Life podcast series. If you go back to the older seasons, you'll hear me. I was on season 3 through I think 10, 9, 10, something like that.
Okay.
And then when I got out, I actually podcasted for MOA, Military Officers Association of America, for 3 seasons. I actually pitched the idea to them and said, hey, you guys need a podcast series. And not only do you need a podcast series, I know somebody who can run it for you. This gal. Um, and I had some great people on their series, and we talked some really cool topics. And then I just kind of took a break from podcasting. I tried to start a podcast series with my partner. It's called Calm in the Storm. It was supposed to be the idea of two military service members. He he retired from the Army as well. He was enlisted special operations, a sergeant major, so E9. I was conventional Army, lieutenant colonel, officer. So
Hmm.
it was kind of like the officer versus the enlisted, the
Yeah.
conventional versus the special ops. Supposed to be like, that kind of story. We're both minorities, both biracial. He's half black, half Puerto Rican. I'm Korean and English, so it's supposed to be from the lens of that and just kind of our journey and the adventure.
Yeah.
We had a couple episodes, but we could just never agree on like when we wanted to podcast, how we were going to podcast. We went live a couple times and people enjoyed it, but we just could never like
It's
get it
it
off the ground.
it's hard. Luckily, I had a little bit of a experience in content creation. So when Nick and I started this, I knew I was like, look, we just have to do things and know we're going to fail and basically plan to fail so that this thing can kind of find its own groove, which it's taken till about now for us to finally be hitting our stride. But it's really where it is today versus 4 years ago is a lot. But I was like, dude, we're just going to fuck up from time to time. We're just going to be okay with that.
Yeah. So that led to finally last year, it took about a year, all of 2025, people urging me, people convincing me kind of getting off my butt and dealing with my anxiety and depression. Um, of getting back to the mic and then just actually recording it. And so I launched right around Christmas, or just right before Christmas, two podcast series. One is Women of War, and Women of War talks about the duality of war. It is not just the women who have served on the front lines, but also the war within, right? The war that we deal with
Oh, yeah.
of being the women that have served in uniform, the women that are nurses, the women that are law enforcement, and the women that are first responders. Up to date, I've launched one season. I'm currently recording the second season. I haven't had any nurses, law enforcement, or first responders yet. So if you know any of those, I would love those women on my show. Everything so far has been military, and that's just because from my background. Um, and it is a sponsored show. Mill Mentor is the sponsor of that show. I've been very grateful to them. And the idea is that women veterans are often the most unknown, invisible veterans. When I say military veterans, most people, 99.9%, will imagine or think of a white male, a very tall, Adonis white male. That's kind
That's
of what they
totally fair.
right?
Nick, basically, he's tall. I don't know if you can tell, but
And
yeah,
so they don't
tall
think
white
of a
male.
woman. You'll hear time and time again women will say that they just don't share that they're a veteran. They won't talk about being a veteran, and if they do, people will argue with them saying no, you're not. How many times you'll go, I'll go in and they'll say, what's your spouse's service number? Like I I I'm the spouse. I'm the spouse.
Yeah.
If you park in a veterans parking spot, I'll get people like, hey, honey, you got to wait till the hero parks there, wait till your husband parks there. I'm like, no, this
Jeez.
veteran, right? Um, they think they're giving me a compliment. They're like, oh, I didn't know that pretty girls could serve. Like, it's kind of a backhanded compliment. Like,
Yeah.
so pretty girls can't serve in the military? Like, I'm like, not sure how to take that, but okay. So that's where Women of War comes from.
Okay.
And then my second podcast series is Unbreakable Storm. Unbreakable Storm is for those that have hit rock bottom and their rise to the top again and being able to survive those storms. And that was a very personal um, reflection and storyline. Me just hitting rock bottom, I think, numerous times from my business hitting rock bottom,
Yeah.
numerous times me, just hitting rock bottom from my divorce and my suicide ideation and just almost being successful from taking my own life to um just the myriad of different reasons as to why I've hit rock bottom. And so the idea is that define your rock bottom, whether it's your business going under, transitioning, not going the way that you thought it needed to go, divorce, cancer, the loss of a loved one. Any one of those can be life altering, but
Hmm.
the intent is that the people that come on, that when you hear their stories, you're just like, holy crap, I'm not sure I could have survived that, but I'm glad that person did, and they're imparting nuggets of wisdom to those that are listening, and that you're inspired by what they're sharing, and that you take away from their story the drive to want to, do better, be better, and improve
Yeah.
the life that you have. And I've been fortunate to record one season. I'm recording for a second season. The nice thing about Unbreakable Storm is it's open to everybody. You do not have to be military affiliated.
Hmm.
You could be male or female. So it's open to everybody. The only requirement is that you have a true rock bottom moment in your ability to rise and what the takeaway is from that. And I've had some amazing guests. I've had those that have gone through drug addiction and being able to come back on the other side. People that have gone through divorce. People that have broken generational curses and trauma. I've people that screwed up so badly in the military, but somehow figured out how to still make it at the very end,
Yeah.
and do something for themselves. The opener of my show was Nick Lavery. He's a warrant officer in the Army, the first amputee to still serve on active duty,
Oh, wow.
special operations guy. Great guy. He's talk about tall. This guy is amazingly tall, um, but amazing, inspiring guy. If you don't know anything about Nick Lavery, I recommend you look him up. His story is nothing short of amazing.
Do you
Um,
think he'd come on our show?
you could reach out to him, to his
Okay.
organization, but totally inspiring. He still serves. He's active duty.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, just so I've just been fortunate of just some of the people that have come on and shared their story. So, if any of one of your guests have had rock bottom moments, or those that are listening and would like to share theirs, I would welcome their story as
Yeah,
well.
Michael Serger comes to mind. He talked about it on the podcast when he was on with us. But if you're not familiar with him, I can connect you with him so
Yeah,
that
that's
you can
great.
talk to him. But because he's one of those people now that a lot of what he's doing is talking about his experience and using it to, just like you were saying, to educate others. I want to tell you about this book because I read it. I wasn't in love with the ending, but that's because it draws a lot on like making stuff right with your parents, and that's a huge issue right now, especially with one of them for me. But it's a good book, especially the beginning. And what's interesting is after we interviewed Dr. Rachel Yehuda, she's actually the quoted in this book is very interesting. But it's called It Didn't Start With You work. Well, that's the workbook. But the book is called It Didn't Start With You. And it's written by Mark Wolin, and I can send you a link to buy it or something. But where you talked about family trauma and generational trauma, it hits hard on that book. And I really like science. I always joke like I could be an engineer or scientist, but I didn't have the study habits, kind of like how you struggle with the numbers in school, so you didn't get that degree. So it really spoke to me, especially in the beginning, as far as like how generational trauma can physically, like in just in terms of science, not even metaphysically, transfer from a parent or grandparent to a child or grandkid. So I just thought I'd throw that out.
Yeah.
Maybe something you want to check out. It'd be interesting, and it's definitely an interesting angle, and it fits in with a lot of the education that you and I have from having these talks with people and our own stuff. So,
Yeah, I'll love to check it out. I think for me, I understand the generational trauma from my family. Um, and I understand it, I accept it, and for me I I I accept it in a way where it's like I know why it happened and where it comes from, and I know that my parents love me. And I choose to draw a line and say, like, there are so many things that I'm taking from that, and I appreciate the way that I was raised, and the things that have been done for me, because I'm first generation here in the US,
mhm.
but there are things that I will choose to do differently for my children, but I still want to be able to have them connected to my culture.
Yeah,
um but I completely understand why it is the way it is, right? When you take into context culture, when you take into context history, right? They've been,
Yeah.
uh, and this is the part I think America, especially when you take in context of what's happening in America today. And I'm not trying to get political. I'm just saying when
No,
you
yeah, it's
get
yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. Yeah.
today, and this is why I think for me, I always take a step back instead of just, getting all uptight with what's going on. I kind of take a more of a educational look. And I think this is why I get also very patriotic about our country when people are like, "Oh, America sucks," and you know,
Yeah, I hate that.
and I,
Yeah.
and I think this is also, I think, also being a veteran too. I'm like, look, I've traveled around the world. I've had the opportunity to see many parts of the world, both because the Army has afforded me that
Yeah.
opportunity, whether I liked it or not, and then the opportunity because I got to personally travel in places I
Hmm.
wanted to go to. And I will say this, even with all the crazy troubles we have right now, America is still the best place in the world. And I would
Yeah.
hands down take this country, saying that I love and respect the culture in which my family has come from, Korea, right?
Mhm.
I identify as being Korean American, but I am American. And I say that because what other country in the world that people die to come to? I don't know of any other country.
I'm not aware of any.
Um, and the other part is, yes, we are one of the younger nations, but yet people die to come to ours. It's because it's the ideology and the concept of what America was born and crafted from.
Yeah.
That is something that other people know and value, and it's worth fighting for. And when and it's not just me, right? Many other families have lived through this. My family have lived through war, right? They have seen war. Most Americans have not. And I'm not talking about us as veterans. I'm talking about
Yeah.
everyday Americans. They do not understand, other than 9/11, right? They just saw one small little glimpse, but they don't know the totality of war, what it's like to live in oppression in every sense of that word, what it's like to have everything taken from you. My family
Yeah.
has lived through that, where they've lived through poverty, where they didn't know um how they were going to survive. My family was assassinated because of believing against the ideology that was coming into Korea, right, which was the
Hmm.
communist regime that was coming down. They lived through the Japanese occupation. Oh, by the way, before that, that was the Civil War in Korea, World War II, the Japanese occupation. I mean, you're talking decades
Yeah.
of war,
Constant conflict.
constant conflict. What does America know? They saw a day where
Hmm.
we were bombed
Yeah.
and the after effect of that. Yes, yes, our generation, we went to war for 20 years, right?
Hmm.
But we're talking about 1% that bore that cross,
Yeah.
physically bore that cross. But most Americans do not understand what that life is like.
I
My
agree.
family and many other families, immigrants, they understand that. That's why they're willing to die to come to this country. So
Yeah.
for me, that's a no-brainer. America's still the best country, even
Yeah.
with how crazy everything is. And it's worth
Right.
fighting for.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's interesting because I think like listen to Chase Hughes on a podcast. He's a oh, I also call him a psycho guy. He's like a expert in human behavior is what I should say. He's not a psycho. But he talks about this pyramid, and this made so much sense to me. And each level, as it gets satisfied, the next level is the goal of the human mind is to satisfy. You're shaking your head. Have you heard of this already, or are you
I mean,
just
it's very similar to this the higher Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
okay? Maybe it's the same thing, and it's basically like security is at the very bottom. You got to be secure, and then I think it's like food, and then at the top is emotion. And so many people live like such a cush life in the United States, and I don't care how poor you are, it's still way better. I'm sure you can attest to this. It's still way better than poverty in another country, or even things looking pretty good in another country. And so I don't care how many student loans you have, but you're living with your parents and you have a warm house or a cool house in the summer and you know where your next meal's coming from. you're so far ahead of everything else, and that's where that the emotion at the top comes in of like, well, now we got to invent problems, or we're going to make things worse, or of course there's tons of manipulation. We have to get into that, but yeah, yeah, it's I wish people would take a step back and kind of look at it apolitically and really analyze what might be going on. But we are starting to get totally off topic now. I will let you go. You have just really been a trooper sticking it out. I had so many. I mean, I knew this was going to be an interesting conversation, but I just had so many more questions developed. In fact, I only drew one question from my usual list of questions, so we had so much other stuff to talk about. Who knows? Maybe we'll have to have you on again and talk about more stuff. But yeah, and we'll include all your links and everything in our description to make sure that everyone can get connected with your podcast. They both sound fascinating, as well as anything else you want us to put up. And feel free to email Nick for that because he's going to handle that way better than me, technology wise. So yeah,
I appreciate it.
yeah. Anything else you want to add or anything?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to share on your show. And for any of your listeners, if you fit the profile for Women of War or for Unbreakable Storm, I would love for them to reach out and have a chat with me and see if they could be a potential story.
Perfect. And we'll make sure that whatever information you want them to use to reach out to you, we'll make sure it gets put up as well. So.
Good.
Olivia, you were a fantastic guest. Thank you so much, especially for staying up late. Um, so I hope you have a wonderful evening and I wish you the best of success.
Thank you so much.
Mhm. We thank you for listening and we hope you got something helpful out of this content.
If you're looking for more, be sure to check out our resources tab on our website.
Unbroken-veterans.com.
And if you're looking for ways to connect, be sure to reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn.
Until next time, remember to check your zeros, fives, tens, and 25s.